Testing 得啦，各位同事。
Members, the mic is now working. It's the appointed time and we have a quorum. Let's get started. The scheduled end time of this meeting is 6:15 p.m. If necessary, I'll extend this meeting for 15 minutes. I'd like to remind members that if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the discussion items today, please, in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedures, disclose the nature of such interests before you speak on the relevant items. Please also keep in mind Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedures concerning voting on items in relation to the interests you have. I would like to first declare that I am the consultant of the Bank of China, Hong Kong, as there are two public works projects to be discussed today. I will first deal with a request for further discussion of Agenda Item 3 about 895TH Northern Metropolis Highway. According to the Public Works Subcommittee, there is no need to have a further discussion on this item. However, Dr. Junius Ho, Mr. Peter Shiu, as well as Mr. Michael Lee jointly request the Finance Committee to have a further discussion on this item. According to paragraph 3A of the FC procedure, the chairman shall put forth without amendment or debate the question on the request. Therefore, I put the following question to vote. This committee agrees to have a further discussion on PWSC 2024-2520. Would members in favor of this question please raise their hands? Please raise your hands now, as we have to do a count. Would those against please raise their hands? All right. I believe that the majority of members present are against this question. This question is negatived. Since this Finance Committee has decided not to have a further discussion of PWSC 2024-2520, after we have the discussion of the other items, I'll put this item 3 to vote. Now, Agenda Item 1, FCR 2025-242551. This item seeks approval of the recommendation of the PWSC made at its meeting held on the 7th of February 2025 on PWSC 2024-2519. It is about 74MC Redevelopment of Shek Health Center. It is to upgrade 74MC to Category A at an estimated cost of 2,133.8 million in money of the day prices. The Public Works Subcommittee did not recommend further discussion on this item, and there are no more than 3 members requesting to have a further discussion on this. Therefore, we will not discuss this item further. I now put this item FCR 2024-2551 to vote. Would those in favor please raise their hands? Will those against please raise their hands? All right, I believe the majority of the members present are in favor of this item. I declare that this item approved. Agenda Item 2, FCR 2024-2553. This item invites members to approve the revision to the terms under Loan Fund Head 280, Private Hospital Development Subhead 101 Loan for the CHK Medical Center Development Project to further extend the first repayment date of the loan by 3 years. The Health Bureau, on the 14th of February 2025, consulted the panel on health services of this item, and the administration provided a supplementary information paper on this item. For this item, we have with us Dr. Libby Lee, Undersecretary for Health, Dr. Sam Ho, as well as Professor Chai Chu, and Dr. Lo Ming. We also have representatives from the Hospital Authority. I now invite Chairman of the Panel on Health Services, Dr. David Lam, to give us a briefing on the discussion. At the meeting on the 14th of February 2025 of the Panel on Health Services, the members supported the administration to extend the first repayment loan for another 3 years. And we recommended this item to be scrutinized by the Finance Committee. Some members considered that the CHK as well as the CHK Medical Center should review as well as update the financial projection of the hospital to reflect the actual situation. Members also suggested that the repayment period be extended for half a year first, and the hospital will then apply for an extension again afterwards. There were also members who were concerned that the hospital would not be able to repay the loan even after 3 years, and members asked the administration what it would do if that was the case. On this, members thought that the government should then re-enter and take possession of the hospital, or through subsidy divert public hospital patients to the CHK hospital. Also, members were concerned about the ratio of staff cost as well as the financial projection, and asked how the hospital would increase revenue and cut spending. On this, members suggested that the hospital enhance its partnership with insurance company and expand its businesses and roll out unique services as well as roll out hospital tourism. And the administration has provided supplementary information about this. Thank you, Dr. David Lam. Before we have a discussion, I'll first invite Dr. Libby Lee, Undersecretary for Health, to walk us through the paper. Good afternoon, members and chairman. We seek the Finance Committee's approval on the extension of the repayment period. The CHK as well as the CHK Medical Center representatives are here today to address members' questions. In 2014, CHK suggested developing a private hospital, and in 2015 April, the CUHK Limited was asked for a 4 billion loan. According to the original plan, between 2023 to 2032, 10 annual installments had to be made by the hospital, and it was $403 million approximately, and plus interest charge on the outstanding loan amount for each installment. In 2019, the hospital started operating. However, because of COVID, there were difficulties, and after consideration, it is believed that the hospital wouldn't be able to repay the loan, so it asked for another 5 years to repay the loan. In the end, in February 2023, at the Panel on Health Services, there was a discussion about extending the loan repayment period for 5 years, and based on members' views, we made an adjustment. In 2023, the Finance Committee permitted the CHK Hospital to extend the loan payment period to the 19th of March 2025, and subject to the review of the hospital's financial situation, the Finance Committee may approve the remainder 3-year extension, that is, to the 19th of March 2028. The CHK Hospital is required to provide public medical services to offset the estimated interest originally payable during the extension period. The hospital would also have to report to the LegCo its financial situation and operation. And this year, on the 14th of February, the panel listened to the CHK's report on the financial situation, and it recommended the FC to have a discussion on the extension of the loan repayment period. After years of efforts, it is understood that the business model of the hospital is viable. The Health Bureau has provided supplementary information about the services provided by the CHK hospital. Statistics show that the hospital has improved in terms of its provision of medical services. It is mostly because of the control of costs as well as its service model that made the hospital suffer a loss. In our communication with the CHK hospital as well as the CHK, we see their determination to improve its operation and that it is quite optimistic about the future operation of the hospital. So we ask members to give CHK as well as the hospital an opportunity to change the situation by extending the loan repayment period for another 3 years. The CHK hospital will contain costs as well as improve efficiency to improve its financial situation as well as business strategies. In terms of discharging the service deed, the CHK hospital in 2024 met all the requirements. The CHK hospital has been providing packaged charging services and the target met reached 51%, reaching about 40% of the bed days requirement in terms of providing packaged charging services. In the 3rd year of its operation, the CHK hospital admitted 15,253 SOP cases as well as 5,720 day procedure cases from the HA. The hospital is supposed to provide 5,698 bed days of public medical services. In the end, excuse me, Undersecretary, how much more time will you need? I'll be brief. I just want to say that the hospital exceeded its target in terms of their commitments to the government. We hope that the service model of the hospital will work so that it will provide services with transparent pricing to give an alternative option to members of the public. The Health Bureau in the future will continue to communicate closely with CHK as well as the hospital in terms of its operation and financial situation. And each year, the hospital will report to LegCo on its financial status. We're happy to take members' questions, and I'll ask Professor John Chai, Council Chairman of CHK, to say a few words. Please be brief. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman. I thank LegCo for giving us the opportunity to make a report here. CHK Hospital is committed to serving the public. It is a non-profit making private hospital and it seeks to provide packaged medical services to provide an alternative option to members of the public. At the same time, it carries out teaching as well as research work. It has been working with the public hospital to ease the burden of the public healthcare system. 2 weeks ago, at the meeting of the panel on health services, CHK as well as members of this council both expressed their hopes that the service model of the hospital would be successful. We are confident that the business model of the CHK hospital is viable. We want to point out that this is a new service model. It is a private hospital that adopts transparent pricing. At the same time, it has been supporting the public healthcare system in providing different types of services. We've been learning continuously on how we can do better. As you see from the paper, the CHK Medical Center has been improving its financial position. However, the cash balance that it has now is not sufficient to repay the loan. There's still a shortfall of cash. The CHK hospital has to seek approval from the FC to extend the loan repayment period. The CHK hospital will, through providing medical services to the public, to pay back the interest. the government will not suffer any losses based on this model. And this is based on the interest rate of the government exchange fund, that is 5.6%. And the interest rate payable is about 120,749 bed days of services. According to the statistics, we may only be able to earn a profit by 2026 or 2027. In terms of the cash balance, it will be back on the track by 2027 or 28. This will achieve a break-even by then. However, the original financial projection is similar to that we have made now. CHK is responsible for the operation of the hospital. Over the past few years, $2.6 billion have been injected to the hospital. In the coming 10 years, another $300 million will be injected, raising the total amount to $3 billion. In terms of the governance of the hospital, the CHK will continue to pay attention to the operation of the hospital to ensure smooth operation. In the council of the CHK, we agreed to appoint Professor Dennis Low as the board of directors of the hospital. We hope that LegCo members will support this application so that the hospital can continue to run.
想發問啊，咁
28 members would like to speak, and I think we have roughly 170 minutes left in relation to meeting time. So please confine your Q&A to 5 minutes each so that we can put the matter to the vote before the end of the meeting. Let me read out the order of members speaking. Johnny Ng, Adrian Ho, Hui Simon Lee, Lam So Wai, Shanghai Long, Chen Hoi Yen, Michael Tian, Dennis Leung, Yang Wing Kit, Tang Fei, Rock Chen, Lam Chun Sing, Chen Wing Kwong, Carmen Ken, Chen Xiu Hong, Su Chang Wing, Chen Pui Leung, Mr. Luke and Chi Kok Keung, Tan Yue Xiang, and Chen Kim Po, and Priscilla Leung, Yan Kong, and Doreen Kong, Tommy Zheng. There are already 29 on the list. So for members who are within the LC complex and would like to speak, please return to the conference room to queue up. I will draw a line in due course. First of all, Mr. Ng, well, there is a government loan, and for the CUHK Medical Center, I do support the packaged charging scheme, because in addition to the public sector, you do have a choice to go to a private hospital. Well, we have had 3 or 4 years' time in relation to the operation of the hospital, but then it was difficult for the center because of the COVID epidemic. Now, Professor Low would like to chair the board of directors, so he's determined to make good the problem. Well, it is said that in the year 2024, there are 6 areas in which there will be new policies. I want to know by how much will the cash flow be improved, and would you like to elaborate on the 6 areas and why they weren't taken up in the past and you will only do it now? And then, according to the projection of the independent financial advisor, by deferring the loan repayment, well, in fact, the closing cash balance will drop from 576 million in 2022-23 to 266 million in 23-24. But in fact, I know that we have only got $100+ million. It would only be in the year 2028 that you will break even. So I'm afraid it is difficult to convince us about the cash balance. Please tell us if the administration has revealed the reasons for the drop in the figures in relation to the projections? Why are you confident that you can break even? Undersecretary, I thank Mr. Ng for his questions. For the year 2024, there are 6 new areas in relation to business strategies. I'd like to defer to my colleague, and then the UHK will also will tackle other questions. Dr. Feng, thank you for the question. In relation to our business strategies, there are 6 areas, and we'd like to focus on the market components. In other words, the sources of our patients. One being, and it is a large chunk, and that's in relation to the expansion of the packaged charging services. Well, it appears to us. Please speak closer to the microphone, Dr. Feng. We can't hear you properly. I'm sorry about that. Well, it seems that the packaged charging services are welcomed by the patients. So we believe that it will be the main driver for our business growth. And in addition to the public, the insurance companies were hesitant in the beginning. And as of now, I think major insurance companies found the packaged charging services acceptable, and in fact that has become the basis of many business deals with us, and to a large extent we're able to expand our business. So far on our website we have already announced the rates for 819 items of packaged charging services. With transparency in pricing, we believe that it will be a major momentum for our business growth. Another point is that, as far as insurance is concerned, other than covering the packaged charging services, other non-packaged charging service patients also found it important. For those with serious illness like cancer patients, again, such patients form a major sector of our clients. And so you can see the importance of insurance. And the third area, well, Dr. Feng, if you're going to elaborate on all the 6 points in this way, you would have to keep on speaking for more than 8 minutes. So please confine the Q&A to 5 minutes. Where we're focusing on our different segments or sectors of our clients. Thank you. What about the cash flow? Would you like to elaborate on that? Well, for the cash balance, well, in the past, the independent financial advisor carried out the projection a few years back. At that time, the forecast and the economic situation were different. The IFA had a different idea than what things are like now. Now, as far as the revenue picture is concerned, we believe that it is quite similar to the track mentioned by the IFA. But then for the cost, well, there is a difference. The main reason being that as far as cost-revenue ratio is concerned, they did projected a higher level than the actual one. So we'll make sure that we'll be more realistic about that, and that's in relation to the doctor-related cost-revenue ratio. Mr. Ho, again, I want to talk about the cash balance projection. I think it is too simple. Yes, as far as revenue is concerned, it is projected to grow year by year. I just wonder whether you can have more information for us. That is, in which business area do you expect to have a growth in the revenue? And on what basis are you saying that there will be a growth? I don't think we can be convinced if you just simply say that there will be an annual growth in the revenue. It will be difficult to understand. Moreover, for the operational costs, again, it is increasing year by year. What about saving measures? I think you are quite poor in making savings when it comes to costs. And in fact, in the year 2025, June, it was $146 billion. In the year 26-27, you don't have to repay, but then the cash balance will be $2 million only. So in the beginning of 2028, you will have $2 million, and then you have to start to repay, and then you have to repay $600 million a year. So in the year 2028, in month of June, you're supposed to have cash balance of $183 million. How come that you can save up to $400 million? Because you've only got $183 million cash at that time. And then there will be a negative figure. How come that there is a negative figure? And in fact, on the face of it, it will take you all the way up to June 2033 that you can barely afford the repayment. So my question is, by what means can you convince this committee that you are able to be true to the cash balance projection and that you are in a position to repay? Now, you need to increase revenue and you have to cut costs. You have to expand your business. According to your paper, you do talk about the obstetrics department. Would you like to consider assisted childbirth, because there is indeed such a demand, even though the administration might have a different view. But then in the market, there is a demand. And in fact, the women concerned have traveled to Thailand or other places. Can you not consider that so as to keep your patients in Hong Kong? Undersecretary, I will speak first and then I will ask Dr. Fung to supplement. According to information from CHKMC, starting from 2022, the bed days as well as the number of patients discharged in relation to day services, we've seen an increase, a huge increase. I think the revenue has grown as a result. As to the other questions concerning the cash balance, I will defer to Dr. Fung. Dr. Fung, thank you for your questions. In relation to the revenue and the cost, if you look at our supplementary note in the past 2 years, we are able to improve our cost control measures on different fronts. Say, for example, cost revenue ratio for doctors and then non-doctor staff costs and its revenue ratio, as well as the fixed costs. Vis-a-vis revenue ratio, indeed it has been falling. So we believe that the cost ratio will be improving all the time with our expansion in business. Now, what we are saying is that we're making projections. We are being prudent, and therefore in the projected figures in the coming 3 years, things will be rather tight. And we believe that we will be having a dialogue with the university. We will join hands to work hard and we'll try to find solutions. Just now, you talked about, well, you have only got $183 million. You can't even afford to repay the interest. How come that you're supposed to be able to repay in the following year? So please focus on the cash flow in the year 2028. Dr. Fung. Well, we believe that we project that the cash flow will still be a matter of having a shortfall. Well, in fact, $400 million, that's the shortfall. Indeed, we have to talk to the university to work hard and we have to find other ways to resolve the problem. I'm sure the following 20 plus members will have more questions concerning the cash balance. Mr. Hui Simon Lee. Well, for COHK to run a hospital, I'm concerned and I always support it. I'm going to vote for the paper, hoping that they'll have more time to make the whole thing viable. I had a question, but then Johnny Ng already took that question out of my mouth, again by Mr. Adrian Ho as well. So we're all interested in the cash flow. It appears that there isn't any concrete solution that is available here to convince us. Well, if you look at the figures, you just can't see how the future is like. Or I can say this, Well, from the information given, we just can't see how you will have business growth and in which areas in the next few years. It appears that you are compressing the cost and you hope and you think that business will grow. But then you are having a business model and you are running a hospital on commercial principles. I had concrete questions, specific questions, but then my colleagues asked my questions already. So what about governance? Perhaps you have to add new blood to your management team who have experience in running commercial or private hospitals. So that's my suggestion. And in fact, my question is along the line asked by other colleagues.
Undersecretary, on the governance of the hospital, I'll ask the CHK, Professor John Chai, to address the question. Yes. In the coming year, we will definitely strengthen the governance of the CHK hospital. We have already appointed Professor Dennis Low, the president of the university, to the board of directors of the hospital. We've also appointed members with medical expertise to sit on the board. On the point about business growth, I'd like to ask Dr. Fong to tell you more about the growth in terms of our number of hospital beds as well as procedure theaters. We are currently running 300 beds and we have in total 516 beds. We will continue to expand the number of beds, which will all be put into service by October 2027. All the hospital beds will be put into service. In terms of surgery theaters or operation theaters, we have 6, 2 for day procedures, 2 for 1 for ophthalmology, as well as 1 for obstetrics. We will continue to expand these facilities. We will continue to work with the insurance sector. For example, we will promote our obstetrics services. There is a 20 to 30% growth in terms of these businesses or services, so we are quite optimistic about the growth of business. We will strengthen our partnership with the insurance companies and we will continue to promote our packaged medical services. Well, Dr. Simon Lee asked whether you will include people with experience in running businesses to sit on the board. We currently have members with this background sitting on the board, and every month we have a discussion among the council members. Ms. Connie Lam. CHK is trying to extend the repayment period for some $4 billion of loan. I want to know how the CHK hospital is going to revert the situation. I've talked to some of the doctors there, and I know there have been problems with manpower management. Say the operation theater, there is not enough manpower to run the operation theater. Some patients want to pay for the surgeries, but no one is performing the surgery. Also, it is mentioned just now that the hospital has been trying to contain costs. As far as I understand, the hospital has been hiring part-time nurses as well as APNs to do all the frontline work. Registered nurses or APNs aren't for the frontline type of work, so this is a management issue. On financing, between 2028 to 2033, the cash balance will still be in the red. With such an unstable financial situation, will the hospital seek help from other organizations for financing? I don't really know what kind of organizations will be able to offer help. According to media reports, as well as reports from KOLs, the CHK Hospital has been offering some really good services that are widely recognized around the world. However, the government is not an ATM. The loan will have to be repaid. I'm not confident that the hospital will manage to repay the loan after 3 years. Will it ask for another 3-year extension for the repayment? Undersecretary, on the future operation of the hospital will have to contain costs as well as enhance efficiency in order to turn around its business from red to black. Also, the government will not suffer any losses because the hospital will pay back the interest by providing public medical services. I'll ask Dr. Feng to tell you more. Yes, Dr. Feng. On the surgery or operation theaters, I don't think Ms. Lam got the most updated information currently. We don't have any empty slots for the theaters. All 6 theaters are occupied. We have major procedures being performed every day, and the doctors have not had any problems with handling the surgeries and procedures. It is true that at the initial stage we couldn't hire enough nurses, so some of the theaters were left idle, but now all the theaters are in use. Also, it is not the case that the nurses are dealing with HCA. We only have a few part-time nurses in the hospital. Most of the nurses meet the requirement of the ratio recommended by the Department of Health. We had difficulties with hiring nurses, but the situation has stabilized now. Yes, Dr. Chen. Even if the repayment period is extended by 3 years, the shortfall of cash will still be huge. So we looked into this. We thought about whether it would be possible to make use of the cash flow in the market to help improve the hospital's financial situation. We have approached some investors with patient capital. These patient capital investors, they focus on medium to long-term investments that last for 7 to 10 years or to 15 years. They invest in equity or shareholdings. They look at the risks. They look at whether the hospital would be able to repay the loan. In our case, they look at whether the hospital is a good private hospital. We're talking about patient capital. In the medium to long term, they look at whether the business model is viable. So the feedback we got so far is positive. These long-term investors, they don't look for high returns based on the credit risk as well as the prices. They decide whether to make an investment. CHK Hospital is not an independent private hospital. It is a hospital wholly owned by CHK, so it has to shoulder the social responsibility. As mentioned, the hospital offers transparent, packaged medical services. In the long run, The hospital hopes to help enhance the healthcare system and ecosystem of Hong Kong. And the proposals that I just mentioned are just being explored at the initial stage. Based on the operation of the hospital, we will explore these proposals further with the market or investors. Yes, you have a comment? Was there a case where a ward was assigned with over 10 APNs? Well, this is a mismatch of manpower if it is the case. Yes, Mr. Shanghai Long. The CHK hospital was established with the support of the government as well as the CHK and the other sectors. It provides packaged medical services which are transparent. Also, it provides a platform for the research done by the CHK, so I'm leaning towards voting in favor of this proposal to extend the repayment period. The government is facing a fiscal deficit and we have to deal with it. Also, the hospital is suffering a loss and we have to think about how to turn around its business from red to black. I have 3 questions. First, I have a question for Undersecretary Dr. Libby Lee. Professor Lo Chung Mao said the worst case scenario would be the government taking back the hospital. Is the government prepared to take possession of the hospital in case the financial situation of the hospital does not improve? And if that is the case, will the hospital become a private one or a public one? Also, just now, Professor John Chai said on the board of directors there are people who work as doctors and there are also people with business background. Apart from Dr. Feng Hong, at the management level, do you have anyone in the position who have the business background? Also, does the packaged charging scheme work? You said that there were businesses, but however, costs have been high, so the profit is not enough to cover your costs. And how are you going to resolve that? Thirdly, I have been to the CHK hospital 4 times. I am the founding chairman of the Hong Kong Top Talent Services Association. I hope the hospital will promote these services to the top talents who come to Hong Kong. I want to know if any top talents who came to Hong Kong chose the services of the CHK hospital. Undersecretary, the first question is whether the government is prepared for the worst case scenario. According to the loan agreement, if the repayment period is extended by 3 years and the hospital still fails to repay the loan, we will impose an additional interest rate on the hospital. And if the hospital still fails to pay back the interest, then the government will take possession of the hospital. If that day comes, the plan will have to be in line with our healthcare plan in general. Dr. Fong, on the business model, as said a number of times, will the business model be implemented? If it is a wrong business model, it would be problematic. We've been having a discussion on this with members on the board with business background. We've had the guidance as well as leadership of some business leaders. So it looks like our business model works because the insurance sector at the beginning, they were quite skeptical about the packaged charging scheme. However, the major insurance in Hong Kong now, they all accept this scheme. And this allows us to grow our businesses. On the Top Talent Pass scheme, I thank Mr. Shang for his support and help. In our obstetrics department, well, 70% of our patients, they speak Putonghua. So
Next, Ms. Chen Hoi-yen. Thank you, Chair. For CHKCM, I don't think you should regard it simply as a private hospital like others. I'm interested in its development. Well, in fact, you do have a very unique positioning, and you will shed light on healthcare reform. In fact, you are a pioneer. My idea is that I do support your hospital. I hope it can continue to operate. But as electrical members, we have to be gatekeepers for public money. For the CUHKCM, I don't think it is just a matter for the team that is attending the meeting. You have got a very strong team, medical as well as financial experts. I think the government should also take a stake regarding the information concerning the accounts and the figures. My question is, what sort of support can the Bureau provide to CHK? You talk about imposing an additional interest rate. Now, if they can't repay the loan, is it simply they themselves to be blamed? Now, for a hospital, now it is difficult for hospital to break even in 10 years, and not to mention that they are having a brand new model of operation. So that's a question for the Bureau. Another question is, just now, patient capital was mentioned by Dr. Loman Chen. Everybody is concerned about the cash shortfall of $400 million. What about the patient capital? Do you think that it can help? Well, it seems that you are very positive, you are fully confident, but can it really cover the shortfall? The third question from me is about the collaboration with the insurance companies. Paragraph 15 of your paper, and it is behind the year-on-year growth of revenue of about 110%. Are you relying on this to catch up, or would you count on the packaged charging services? But then the growth in that area is a mere 27%. So to make good the shortfall, where are you going to get the money? Now, even for the FS, having the entire government behind him, he finds it difficult. Undersecretary, resources to be given to the CUHK-CM. We are here to invite electrical members to support the loan repayment extension. Well, in fact, it is a very strong support. Had that not been granted 2 years ago, they would have already been start repaying the loan. Now, in the coming 3 years, we are more than happy to liaise and cooperate with CUHK and CUHK-CM. We'll look at their financial arrangements as well as their operation. We do want the hospital to succeed. Well, the service load has increased, but we do hope that they can address the question of cost control. We are working very hard with CUHK to see how we can have further improvements. Other areas like manpower, etc., we'll be happy to talk to CUHK. I think CUHK has to identify its own problems and address them. For financing options, Dr. Chen talked about internal discussion. They haven't started a formal discussion with the government. I'm sure in the coming 3 years there will be a lot of discussion. When we are ready, we will come back to you and we'll have your agreement before we will implement them. Well, perhaps the CHKCM can supplement. Dr. Norman Chen, CVC, CHK, can you tell us about the size of the potential patient capital? It is a very initial exploration. We haven't yet come to the specifics. For the potential pool of patient capital, well, it is huge, but then they would be interested to know about the medium-term to long-term investment. People may want to buy bonds, but others may also want to have something more long-term. I think they're going after a reasonable rate of return. I think it all depends on the actual amount of shortfall that we project, and we have to talk about the right amount of time, 5 years or 8 years. I think that would affect the attractiveness and whether we can convince them that the interest rate, the rate of return is attractive. But I can tell you that for patient capital in Hong Kong, I think the size of the pool is huge. In fact, the investors are trying to identify investable opportunities. Well, we do have insurance experts on the list, and that question can be taken up later. Michael Tian, Chairman. Well, let me talk about our position. I don't need an answer from the Undersecretary. Just on the 14th of February, the Health Services Panel had a discussion. Back then, I said that the projections were not convincing. I just can't take them. Compared with 2223 and 2324, if you look at the actual figures as well as the projected figures, there are huge differences. And for the year 24-25, you think that you will lose $54 million. It is all because you believe that you can have a profit or have a revenue of $24 million. It's up to you to give us any figures. I think what is important is to check what is needed in the relevant period. You need to improve by more than $200 million in the first 6 months. In the second half of the year, when compared with the same period last year, you need to be better by $170 million. It is just outrageous. It is incredible. Well, it is said that the previous figures were projected by advisors, and you said that they weren't realistic. Now you have come up with your own projection. But we're not sure whether you are capable because we are yet to be convinced. Now you start with such projections. You're telling us that in 6 months' time, you're able to improve by $170 million. Well, I think you better showcase your qualifications. Why can't we have it extended by 6 months so that in the second half of the year we can tell whether you are almost right in your projections? If that is, then it is very convincing, and I will accept all your projections. And if you say that you can repay the whole in 2037, I will be convinced. Last time I said, why don't we have an extension of 6 months? But then the secretary said that it's impossible. It's not good for the development of the hospital. Now you're saying that you haven't got sufficient time to prepare the new figures. Well, why don't you have it extended by 1 year? It's impossible to ask for 3-year extension. Now, if you come back year by year and then the figures vary hugely, then for me, who have voted for you would have to be criticized by the public. Now, the figures remain the same, the projections are the same, you haven't improved your figures, you just asked for a 3-year extension. And what is worse is that we haven't got the Secretary for Health. I think this is total disrespect for the LegCo. I had wanted to support the extension. This is because in the long run, it is going to change for the better, and you will be able to repay the loan. But then if I say yes today, it means that I have total trust in the hospital. Well, In fact, I can boast that I have had an MBA qualification. I have yet to convince myself. Well, if you look at the past performance and if you look at the projected revenue of hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't think it has a 30% chance of realizing. Now, if you say that it will only take year 2053 that you can repay the whole, then I will find it more acceptable. I finish with my comments, and if the Bureau and if the hospital are to maintain their position, I will not find it acceptable today. It will be an insult on my wisdom if I'm asked to do so. Well, Mr. Tian did not ask for an answer, so Undersecretary, don't give an answer. Now, Mr. Tian is simply justifying his voting position. So I'm saving you 1 minute's meeting time. Next, Mr. Dennis Leung. I would like to look at the figures. If you go to paragraph 6, which talks about the loss as well as the figures, or if you look at the table, well, I think you have only got 1/4 of the cash balance. In other words, 3/4 of your assets will be gone. For the year 2022 to 24-25, you look at the you were supposed to lose $349 million, but the actual figures is $770 million. So you're doubling your loss. And for the years 25-26 to 28-29, for 4 years in total, you're supposed to be able to have $630 million, but that can't offset the loss in the previous 3 years, as well as other commitments. You still have to incur a loss of $134 million. So in the year 28-29, it is said that for your cash balance, if you try to compare the projected figures and the latest projected figures, well, in fact, it is a matter of 1/4 of what you previously have. Well, if we look at the appendix, there are 11 items. For the 11 items, if we disregard the year 2022, and if you only look at the growth in the years 2023 and 2024, I don't think they are having a growth of more than 1/4. If you really want UHKCM to be in a position to repay the loan of $4 billion to the government, it must make a profit of $800 million. Otherwise, you can't even offset the previous losses, and you won't be able to repay in the future because the growth rate is only 1/4, and yet you are making losses to the tune of 75%. It has been said that doctors are recruited to sit on the board of directors to manage the hospital. That's not what we are after. You need to look at it from an investor's point of view. You have to look at it from a businessman's point of view so that you can have a growth in your revenue and you can control your costs. Now, Professor Low, you are going to sit on the board of directors. You also have to manage the university. You have to manage the hospital. Do you have time to cover all the tasks? Are you going to identify someone capable in accounting investments so as to take the steer? I think that's what we want to know more today in relation to the issue before us. Thank you.
Undersecretary, on management, I'll ask Professor John Chai to tell you more. At the meeting of the panel, we revealed that Dr. Feng Hong will retire in the middle of this year. We're currently looking for the right person to succeed the position of Dr. Feng Hong. We're not pointing out that Dr. Feng Hong made any mistakes. We just want to introduce a new team which will be led by Professor Dennis Low. This is my simple answer to the question. 23 members are waiting to speak. We have very little time left, so members who would like to speak on this item, please come to the meeting room. After the 23rd member, Professor William Wong, has spoken, I will draw the line. Mr. Kitson-ya, I am an alumni of CHK. Well, but I still think that it is the obligation of the university to repay the loan. I don't think the hospital will be able to repay the loan even if we extend the repayment period by 3 years. The government is facing a deficit and it's been trying to increase revenue and cut spending. Members just now spoke about suggestions on increasing revenue, on cutting costs. Do you have any thoughts? I think Ms. Connie Lam wanted to ask the same questions, but she didn't have time. I know you have many senior nurses or experienced nurses. If you do not have enough money, would you rather have fewer experienced nurses working in the hospital? These are some of the ways that you can think about. Another point I want to make has to do with whether I support this proposal. Say you extend the repayment period for 3 years, and if you fail to repay the loan in 3 years' time, what would you do? We don't want to keep extending the repayment period for 3 years. You are so confident about your proposal. So my question is, what if you fail to repay the rent? Repay the loan after 3 years? You have $33 billion. Are you going to pay the loan yourself since you have $33 billion of surplus? Undersecretary, on cutting costs, I will ask the hospital to elaborate. If, say, after 3 years, the hospital fails to repay the loan, we will charge an additional interest rate. And if the hospital still fails to pay the interest rate, then the government will take over the hospital. During the 3-year period, we will keep in close communication with the hospital, and every year we will report to the panel on health services on the operation of the hospital. The CHK is exploring a financing proposal. Our goal is to have the hospital repay the loan in 3 years' time. On cutting costs, yes, Dr. Feng, we've been quite restrained. We devoted a huge amount of fixed cost in the initial stage. As we see a growing number of patients will be able to reduce costs. We are on this trajectory. On manpower, we don't have particularly many experienced nurses. However, we have to meet the basic requirement imposed by the Department of Health in terms of the ratio of nurses. Well, it is written in the paper that the government will take over the hospital if the hospital fails to repay the loan in 3 years. I want to know whether the CHK is confident that it would be able to repay the loan in 3 years. The CHK has 33 billion of reserves. Will it settle the loan if the hospital fails to repay in 3 years? The hospital is in debt, and I think the CHK should be responsible for that if it fails to repay the loan. Professor Chai, I don't want to talk about the history of this project. However, this project kick-started 10 years ago. The environment 10 years ago is very different from that now. The estimate we came up with was very different from that we have now. Putting that aside, I do want to say that the projection we made was perhaps too optimistic. We admit it. Also, it is clearly written in the paper that it is true that we are facing a shortfall of cash flow. The CHK hospital is not capable of repaying the loan now. However, it doesn't mean that the CHK will turn a blind eye on this. We will have injected $3 billion into the hospital. As mentioned by Mr. Chen, we are exploring a financing proposal to see how we can ensure a good financial position of the hospital. We hope that next year when we return to this council, we'll be able to update our projection, and hopefully the operation of the hospital will continue to improve. Mr. Tang Fei. I'm also an alumni of CHK. I don't want to talk about the losses. I want to talk about the table on page 3 about the projection. Year 2026 to 27, it is expected the profit will be about $498 million, and by 2027-28 the profit will be $237 million. Based on what with the economic environment, how do you think the profit will increase by 4 times? If you look at pages 4 and pages 5 of the document, it talks about the business strategies for the 2023 and 24 financial year. It also touches on the business strategies for the 2024 to 25 financial year. So what are the business strategies that would guarantee a 4-fold increase of the hospital's profit? I don't think the hospital can make a 4-fold increase in terms of its profit. You cannot exploit the doctors and nurses. According to the paper, the hospital will engage visiting doctors to help perform procedures. And the revenue generated will be about 26% in terms of the growth. Will you be able to attract visiting doctors? I mean, more visiting doctors. And that is a business strategy for year 2023 to 24. Now, paragraph 25 talks about services for non-local visitors. It is expected that the revenue generated from services for non-local visitors will see a year-on-year growth of 58%. Healthcare tourism is perhaps controversial, especially for local patients as well as their family members. So my second question is completely related to the first one. What business strategies you have to ensure a 4-fold increase of your profit I'll ask Dr. Feng to answer the questions. Yes, Dr. Feng. The hospital still have a lot of hospital beds that have not been put into service. As mentioned, we are running about 300 hospital beds now. In the coming 3 years, we will increase the number of beds to 516, which will all be put into service. Our hospital bed capacities as well as the number of surgeries we can perform have to do with the profit we make. As we continue to expand our businesses as well as service capacity, we can project that we will be able to make a profit. Now, visiting doctors are crucial. The hospital has been working hard to work with different medical groups and healthcare groups to attract doctors from these groups to practice in our hospital. On non-local visitors, we've been seeing a growth in terms of the number of non-local visitors. We've been making use of different publicity channels to attract non-local visitors, including those from the mainland. And we've yielded results. We hope to carry on in this direction. Also, we've been making use of technologies. The medicine faculty is playing a more important role in the provision of clinical services. And this helps us roll out new types of surgeries that we can perform, and this also helps with the business growth. Mr. Rock Chen. CHK Hospital is a non-profit making private hospital, and it's been providing public medical services for members of the public. And I think it deserves our recognition. This is a meeting of the Finance Committee, so I want to look at this from the financial perspective, and I would like to follow on what Mr. Chen and Professor Chai said. In your discussion with the CHK as well as the CHK Hospital, has the government explored increasing or introducing new terms to the agreement? For example, will you make use of cash, collaterals, and extend the loan repayment period from 10 to 15 or even 20 years to ease the burden of the hospital to repay its loan? Because many have already said that it would be impossible for the hospital to pay back all the loan. Would you think about extending the loan repayment period to increase the possibility for the government to get the money back? The worst case scenario would be for the government to take back the hospital, and I think this will really be the worst case scenario, and I don't want to see this happen. Loan enhancement proposal as well as financing proposals mentioned by Mr. Chan may make this work. Page 5 of the paper mentions that year 2023 to 24 revenue from non-local visitors account for just 2.5% of the total revenue of the hospital. Will the government work with the hospital to see how it can strengthen its partnership and collaboration with mainland hospitals to attract more non-local patients to use the services of the CHK hospital so that the hospital can increase its revenue? Under Secretary, we propose to extend the repayment period by 3 years, and we expect that during this period, the hospital will explore new financing options, and in the process, the government will be happy to work with the hospital to see what are the options feasible. However, the government has to make sure that it will not suffer any losses. And under this principle, we will work with the hospital to see what are the feasible financing options, and will report to this council if we have come up with any new plan. Dr. Feng.
Please switch on his microphone. It's not yet working. Is it working? It's fine now, thank you. Well, we'll continue to develop in terms of Xiaohongshu or WeChat or Baidu. We have already established a channel to promote ourselves. In this regard, so far, we have seen that as far as obstetrics and assisted reproduction are concerned, more information is available. We have also cooperated with major healthcare organizations. For patients referred to us, usually they require specialty assistance or they are suffering from serious illness. So in fact, the channels are already there. We'll continue to step up our promotional efforts. Thank you. Next, Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Chair. Well, for the case of the CUHK-CM, it is wholly owned by the CUHK. In the past, people had the impression that CUHK didn't full-heartedly support the hospital. So it seems that you aren't taking good care of your own son and you think that maybe the government will take care of it. And it appears that the university may just want to allow the hospital to be taken over by the government. Now, it seems that the management of the university is trying to rectify it, and you would like to enhance the governance, hoping that there will be a change for the better. If I may pick up the point made by Mr. Yang Wing-kit, he asked the question as to whether there will be more commitment from the university. If you talk about the university repaying the whole, but of course the university has got other duties like teaching in addition to the hospital. So would you like to have other financing options? Does the university have any ideas in mind? Maybe you won't be picking up the loan in full, but do have a partial commitment arrangement in mind. Now, there are public-private partnership schemes, and currently you are running a scheme with the Labor Department, and that's in relation to the rehabilitation of injured employees. The number of employees involved may not be large. Probably it is not due to the university or the hospital, but rather the Labor Department. Can you not try to enhance the business in this regard so that more injured employees can come to you? Well, if you go to other clinics, if you go to the hospital authority, you don't have a specific or tailor-made queue for injured employees, and the waiting time is long. So perhaps you can look at this sector. There is injured employees. But of course, despite expanding into this area, you are still not able to repay the loan. But at least for grassroots employees who are injured at work, they can have a better service. So please consider my suggestion. Let me tell you that at the end of the day, I'm going to vote for you. Not because I'm convinced by your figures, hoping that you can repay the loan in 3 years' time, but rather we want to become an international educational hub, and we are backed up by the national government. CUHK and CUHK-CM, as well as the Faculty of Medicine of the university, they are well known in the world. They occupy quite a good ranking in the QS table. Now, if CUHK has to close the hospital in less than 5 years' time, it will become a laughing stock. Of course, in the beginning, you were affected by the epidemic, but you have to consider that matter. Undersecretary, CU's question to be answered by Professor Cha, and then Dr. Fong can answer the other questions about the hospital. I'm grateful to the member for making the point. That is, a university has this task to educate the new generation, to carry out research, to have knowledge transfer. Now, we have taken up a role in the healthcare reform. I think other universities may not want to do the same easily, but we're more than happy to take up such a mission. Now, this mission comes with a burden, so to speak, and you can tell from the situation that we find ourselves in. In the coming years, the hospital will improve its operation, hoping that there will be more positive figures in the accounts. As to whether the university will make use of its reserve and what other financing options are available, and whether the university will inject capital directly or whether, as Dr. Norman Chen has suggested, we can try to get outsiders to provide financing options to us. I think we have to take a holistic view and we have to review the matter patiently. All in all, the university is committed and we don't want the hospital to be taken over by the administration. Well, for the volume of public service that we are providing, as agreed with the government, it will increase year by year. Mr. Lam talked about the employee rehabilitation scheme. There was a pilot scheme. Many employees were able to return to work in 6 months' time. The number of cases referred is on the low side. We'll try to see if we can step up the publicity together with the Labor Department. The pilot scheme has ended as to how we can make it permanent so that injured employees would be assisted. I think we need to look at other issues like insurers' participation. Next, Mr. Chen Wing-Kwong, I'm a visiting professor of CUHK. Let me focus on my questions. Like other colleagues, we don't want the hospital to come and ask for further extension in 3 years' time. I looked at CUHK's own financial report in the year 2023-24. The global investment market is recovering. Interest rates have gone up in the year 23-24. Return from investment has gone up by 11%. So there is a profit of $2.3 billion. But of course, the university has already earmarked the profits. But then the hospital is a wholly owned subsidiary of the university. Ultimately, the university has to be committed. So has the university considered using part of its reserves to repay at least some of the loan? And then to improve the operation of the hospital, you need to expand into different segments. Currently, the public aren't really familiar with the hospital, and it is not well known to the mainlanders. So I think you need to tell others what advantages you have over others. Now, what about Chinese medicine? Are you going to incorporate Chinese medicine in your service? I think the Chinese medicine school has also got some collaboration schemes. So are you going to have collaboration between Western and Chinese medicine? So perhaps you can exploit that, and then by having more kinds of services, on the one hand you can promote Chinese medicine, on the other hand you can increase your revenue. I would like to share with you my comments and suggestions. So 2 points: whether the university is going to make use of its reserves. Second, diversification of services. Professor Char and then Dr. Fung. Well, CUHK has already made use of its own reserves, $3 billion in total since day one. Dr. Fung, Chinese medicine. As Mr. Chen has said, we have always had the element of Chinese medicine. Basically, the professors of the School of Chinese Medicine of CUHK do provide the service at our hospital. And then for the collaboration between Western medicine and Chinese medicine, cancer patients and allergy patients have been finding our service useful and popular. I think you need to have further promotion. Yes, I agree. We will do so. As I have said, after Mr. Chen Wing-kwong has spoken, I'll draw a line. Now, for the repayment extension, it will expire between this meeting and the next meeting. We must put the matter to the vote. We must vote on it before the end of the meeting today. I just want to know whether anybody in the complex would like to ask questions. If not, then I think everybody in the queue can have their go before we put the matter to the vote. Carmen can. Let me declare, I work for BOCHK. Before we come to a decision, I want to get more information. First of all, Professor Chai, in his opening remarks, told us that the government agreed with the extension and that would not bring about any loss to the government. Please explain your answer. According to the service deed, I think last time, that is in the year 2023, we granted an approval, and I think enclosure 6 carries the supplemental loan agreement, and then the repayment was extended by 2 years. Now you come here to get another 3 years time, and then for the interest payment in the years 6 and 7, there is no need to pay with cash, and that will be offset by the provision of service. I want to know more about enclosures 3, 4, and 5, as well as footnote 6. I want to know that by offsetting the interest payment with service, it is said that there's no loss on the part of the government and you are providing public service. I want to know more about the interest payable. Interest was supposed to be payable and yet it hasn't been paid. So, what about the actual interest rate? 3% in the case of default, as well as the prevailing interest rate for the fiscal reserves with the exchange fund, 3%. So what do you mean by not incurring any loss? But then are you actually using 5.6% as the basis plus another 3%? And then for the projected cash flow, if you look at enclosure 4, now in the year 2028 June, you have to repay $629 million. According to enclosure 3, if you don't need to repay, then you have $181 million or $183 million. That's the cash balance before repayment. So I just can't see how, even without granting the approval in the year 2023-28, you are able to make a repayment. So, Chair, what I want is Dr. Feng, the CEO, talked about the following: 516 hospital beds, if fully commissioned, will put them in a better position. I think usually when you carry out a projection, you have two different scenarios, an optimistic scenario and a less optimistic scenario. So I have to point out that I just can't see how you're able to repay after 3 years' time. So please tell us whether you can have improvement after fully commissioning all the capacity in terms of the hospital beds. Thank you. 2 points here: interest as well as offsetting with public service, and also elaboration on the cash flow projection.
Undersecretary, I'll explain one part first. In 2022 to 23, the Finance Committee approved a revised plan, and back then we explained how we calculated the interest rate. We expected $1.129 billion for the interest rate, and we used the interest rate of 5.6% to calculate that. If this $1.129 billion, taking into account the cost for public hospital services in 2022 to 23, that means within the coming 15 years, it will be equivalent to 120,749 bed days. So within the 15 years, this is how many services the hospital will have to provide. Does that mean interest rate would not be incurred in the form of cash? Well, I have to know what we are approving. I believe with the approval of the Finance Committee, you will sign a supplemental agreement with the hospital. Yes, the subsequent arrangement, please, Under Secretary. We used 5.6% as the interest rate, and we didn't expect the hospital to fail to repay the loan. It was the floating interest rate that we adopted. We agreed with the hospital that within 15 years' time, the hospital would have to provide services of 120,000 bed days. If we revise the agreement again, still the hospital within 15 years' time will have to provide services of 120,000 bed days. That means you're not asking the hospital to pay back the principal, but only the interest, and the interest would be paid back in the form of services. Is that right? We have to be clear that what the approval is about, and we have to make an informed decision. We signed a revised agreement with the hospital, and the hospital did not breach the agreement, so it did not have to pay liquidated damages. I have to watch the time, and members may not be able to ask all the questions they want. Mr. Chen Xiuhong, I can ask the administration to provide a supplementary written reply to Ms. Khan. I've looked at the paper, and I've also looked at the cash flow condition of the hospital. If I describe it as a bad debt, it might sound too negative. With the cash balance of the hospital, it is impossible for the hospital to repay the loan. Also, I think the projection of the hospital's cash flow is too simple or straightforward. With my decades of experience in the business sector, I still cannot decide whether the business model of the hospital is sustainable. We want the hospital to be able to provide affordable private medical services with transparent prices. However, we have to think about where the money will come from. Through the upfront loan of the government, the hospital provided services. However, will the profit made by the hospital be able to sustain its operation at the same time, offer room for the hospital to carry on with its development? Commercially speaking, well, I believe Dr. Norman Chan, as well as anyone with business background would know that for a company to be financially sound, it would have to make use of market forces, that is, to finance the operation of the hospital. I looked at the paper and I feel that I wanted to object to this proposal. However, with the president of the university as well as Dr. Norman Chan on the team, I have a different thought. The CHK has already injected $3 billion into the hospital. With such a good credit rating, it might be possible for the CHK to be the guarantor for the hospital to borrow money. Paragraph 37 sets out the proposals considered by the hospital as well as the government. However, it seems like we have no option but approve this loan repayment extension. The government is the regulator, and I want the government as well as the CHK to give us the undertaking to show that there is a financing option which involves patient capital. I want to know whether there are investors interested in long-term investments or options involving short-term issuance of bonds. To help boost our confidence, it would make it easier for us to vote in favor of this proposal. Back in 2023, I trusted that the CHK hospital would be capable of dealing with the loan. Back in 2023, we were not given a good projection. And we didn't have like the best and worst scenarios. So with the figures you presented to us, do you consider them as the best or the worst case scenario? Will the CHK hospital be able to turn loss into profit between 2028 to 2034? While it might be able to make profit, will the profits be able to sustain the hospital's operation? The questions about different scenarios are quite similar to those asked by Ms. Carmen Khan. Undersecretary, please give a reply in one go. On financing, if this extension proposal is approved, we will talk to the hospital as well as CHK about the financing options, and we will only go ahead with the financing proposals after we get the approval from the Legislative Council. For the rest of the questions, we'll provide written submissions. As Mr. Ronald Chan, the chair, said, we're quite tight with the time. I hope you will leave some time for the administration to give a reply as you pose the questions. Otherwise, we might not have enough time to give members the chance to speak. Dr. So Chun-Wing. Thank you. I first want to thank the CHK for rolling out the new type of services, that is the packaged medical services. This is a new hospital that is testing out a new business model, and I don't think this is easy. I believe the CHK has the capability to make sure a successful operation of the hospital. Today, we're asked to vote on this extension proposal? Well, before I vote, I have a question for the government. I learned from this paper that during COVID, the hospital was having a hard time. However, the undertaking made in 2023 was not fulfilled. You mentioned that you would make a certain amount of profit, but things did not go according to plan over the past 2 years. And the operation of the hospital again did not go according to plan. My question is this. How did the government decide to grant the loan at the beginning to the hospital? We're talking about a new type of hospital with a new business model. Is the government of the view that this model would work? Does the government think that the hospital should carry on with this model? Well, Undersecretary said, in the worst case scenario, the government would take over the hospital. So my question is, do you think it is better for the government to simply take over the hospital or let the hospital continue to run? 2 questions. Is it a better option for the government to simply take over the hospital? Yes, Permanent Secretary. This is from the Government Loan Fund, and the Government Loan Fund is managed by the FSTB. It is true that the CHK hospital will not be able to repay the loan. Now we have to decide whether we should extend the repayment period for 3 years. Will the Health Bureau, together with the CHK as well as the hospital, be able to work out a plan that is a plan that makes sure that the financial situation will be sustainable for the hospital? Years ago, the government granted a 4 billion loan to the CHK hospital. The purpose was to roll out reforms. I think we're still sticking to this principle till today. I think if the hospital is of the view that it can no longer adopt a sustainable or viable service model, then we might come to the worst case scenario. However, we do see that over the past 3 to 4 years, the CHK injected some $3 billion into the hospital, and the president of the university is now sitting on the board of directors. We're also seeing new members sitting on the board. Unless the university or the health bureau is of the view that there won't be a viable plan to sustain the operation of the hospital. Otherwise, we will continue to give time for the different parties to work out a viable plan. It's not a problem for us to give them more time. However, according to the paper, we cannot see what the problem was. How could we save this hospital? Will the problem get worse, or did the CHK hospital make a mistake that is forgivable? We cannot tell from this paper. This is a question and also a comment. Does the Undersecretary have anything to add? This question has been asked by other members. If we have more time, perhaps we can allow the administration to reply.
Next, Mr. Champulang. Thank you, Chair. Regarding this innovative business model of the CHKCM, I really hope that it will succeed. This will enhance the transparency of medical pricing, and it will also help us to control the medical insurance inflation. Well, as far as the financial figures are concerned, as of now, it seems that it is in the year 2030 that there will be sufficient revenue accumulated to repay the principal and the interest. Of course, mention has been made about the possible introduction of patient capital. Now, whether we're talking about a new investor or patient capital, we still have to show whether there is a sustainable business model for the hospital. Now I come to my question. If you look at the information in the paper, in the years 24-25, there are 6 business strategies like the package charging services as well as other business strategies, and the increase in revenue is between 27% and 58%. So it is quite favorable. And if we look at your projection, in the year 2025, there is an increase of 20% in the revenue, but then that would also fall from 20% to 2036 when it is 5% only. So, well, I don't think a commercial enterprise would allow this to happen. That is, it is falling all the time. Of course, in the initial years, you started with a lower base, and so the growth is significant. But I don't think we can allow it to drop to such a low level. So I want to know whether the board of directors has already agreed with such an approach, with such a direction. And then cost control. For many years, your revenue and your operational costs are growing at more or less the same rate. Say, for example, 7% in one case and then 9% in another case. At the end of the day, 5% each. In other words, your revenue grows at the same rate as your cost, then it is difficult for you to accumulate any reserves. So in your business plan, I just wonder if you would agree with me that this should be reviewed so as to make sure that the cost can be better controlled. In particular, I'm interested in the business plan. Maybe the hospital or the board of directors can elaborate on that. 2 points here. First of all, it seems that it is going to fall all the time. Please explain. And then cost control. Would it be the undersecretary? I would defer to the hospital. Perhaps the hospital can also talk about the participation of the FOM of CHK. Yes, hospital. Please switch on the microphone for Professor Low. Well, for sustainable development, as has been pointed out in the initial years, the number of beds will increase, and so the growth rate is higher. But then towards the end of the horizon, it will not be as significant. There will still be some growth, but then the growth rate won't be as fast as the initial growth rate. It is a matter of marginal benefits. For the cost, we try to be conservative in our projection. The major difference between our projection and that of the IFA, it is a matter of the doctor cost ratio. I think theirs is higher, theirs is lower, and ours is higher. And board of directors and the FOM have looked into this question. It is because we have got quite a large number of complex cases. To maintain the quality of our service, we need to engage more experienced doctors. In the future, with the number of patients growing and with a diversity being built into the patient profile, and if we have changes in the ratios among the different specialties, we will have to revisit this again. Basically, we have to revise the projections every year. Next, Mr. Benson Luke. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, for the CHKCM, it is said that it is a not-for-profit, private and teaching hospital. That's what I found on the website in relation to the introduction of this medical center. This is really good. It is unique. And in fact, the medical center has got something innovative like transparency in pricing as well as packaged charging services. Now, for the team overseeing the hospital, we have got top-notch financial experts. And so I think the initial idea is indeed very good. But still, we have to be pragmatic. I think what we have got now was determined 10 years ago. I think, Chair, you understand that even for private enterprises, they might fared very well 10 years ago, but today they are facing difficulties like business reorganization and financial arrangements. We all want the CUHKCMs to succeed. Now I come to my questions. First of all, financing options. Members did ask this question. On the face of it, in 3 years' time, you'll come back and ask for our approval. I think unless you have exponential growth in your business, otherwise we can see that there is still a gap in your figures when it comes to repayment of the loan. So has the government considered debt restructuring, like deferring the loan repayment date or extending it or having something brand new? If you have considered that, why aren't you implementing it now, and why we have to wait for another 3 years? And then I'm glad to learn from Professor Chai that this university is fully committed and hundreds of millions of dollars have already been injected into the hospital, and patient capital investors may be interested in helping out. It is a piece of good news. Now, in the private sector, if you take out a loan, the borrower would need to have trust in the enterprise as well as the parent company. In this case, the parent company is UHK, and it has got $33 billion in its reserve. And now the latest budget speech has asked the universities to claw back the reserves. And I think we are talking about repaying $550 million. I think it is something that the university can afford. So have you ever considered asking the university to help out in the repayment? Or is it the case that you have considered it but you have ruled it out, and why, please? And then I want to confirm with you in relation to one point. Now, in this paper, it talks about the business model and the approach of the university. Do you subscribe to that? When it comes to the worst case scenario, it is a matter of the government re-entering and taking possession of the site. In the private market, you can provide a loan in exchange for a share of the ownership, like the equity. Would you consider that? Would that be sort of feasible in 3 years' time? I think there are 3 questions. First, that's in relation to the future. That is, whether you are giving people the impression that it seems that you are not going to sustain further down the road. Perhaps the Bureau can explain. Yes, in the interest of time, I will be brief. Now, for financing options, CHK has had a lot of discussion among themselves, but not yet with the government. I think if we are able to get the 3-year extension, we'll keep up our dialogue with the university. Anything that is feasible will be in the paper that we will give you in the future. And then for transparent pricing, I think it's something that we find good. And then we hope that CHK can enhance the governance and its efficiency in relation to the hospital. That's why we want to give them 3 more years' time to make improvements. Mr. Look also talked about using the university's reserves to deal with the matter. Have you ever considered such a solution? Professor Chai, please. Professor. Yes, let me be brief about the reserves. Now, reserves of universities are for different purposes. For some that is truly discretionary, well, the size is not really that huge. Next, Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman, for the direction of development of the hospital. You have my full support. For packaged charging services, I think it's good. It can help to enhance the transparency of private hospital pricing, so that more people can use the private hospital service, and that can significantly ease the pressure on the public healthcare sector. Now, I will support the further extension. For the first request for a 2-year extension, I already said that for a hospital with 3 years experience, and if you expect it to be able to make repayments, it would already have been in a very excellent position. So back then I already agreed that they would need 5 years. I am encouraged by the figures in the paper. I really hope that in year 2028 they can come back to repay some of the loan. As to the actual amount, that's a separate issue. Now I have a few questions to ask. First of all, for the independent financial advisor, I think the projections were poorly carried out. Perhaps the IFA would like to project a higher level of revenue and a lower one when it comes to the cost, but people get the impression that this will sort of be luring the government into granting the loan. Now, for the CHKCM to fully commission all the hospital beds, it will be 516 or 523. Currently, they are running 300 or so. Is it because you are not competitive enough, or whether you need time to reach full capacity? Now, I'm really concerned about the utilization rate of the packaged charging services. It is said that the requirement is 50%. In the year 2024, the compliance rate is 51%. Is it a matter of 51% or 50%? That is 25% or what? Why is it so low if it is 25%? I think it is something that we need to encourage. 3 questions: financial projections, hospital beds, as well as the package charging requirement. Under Secretary, let me take up the first and the third questions, and then Dr. Fung the second. For the IFA, well, it was appointed by the CHKCM, will reflect your comment to the university. And then for packaged charging services, what we meant was we asked for 50%, and they have achieved a rate of 51%, so they were compliant. What about the hospital beds? Dr. Feng, well, we have a timetable concerning the number of hospital beds to be commissioned. It was already written into the land lease we signed with the government. Now, for a hospital, it is impossible to fully commission all the hospital beds in one go. It has to be gradual. Well, we need to look at manpower supply, the establishment of systems, so it is impossible to have full commission on day one. And in fact, the demand is increasing all the time, and gradually we are opening more beds. In the coming month, we have another batch of hospital beds to be commissioned, and that can tie in with the demand for our service. Well, for the packaged charging services, currently the utilization rate is 51%. In year 9, according to our service deed with the government, it should go up to 70%. We believe that we are following the trajectory that is increasing. Not everything is amenable to package charging. Like in the case of emergency, it is difficult to foretell what is needed by the patient. And for complex cases, again, it cannot be subject to packaged charging service. So not each and every operation, each and every procedure is amenable to packaged charging service.
都有講
I have one more point to make. I mentioned in the previous meeting I think the government or the relevant party should not wait until 2 to 3 weeks before the meeting to submit the papers. Please don't give people the impression that we will give the approval. This is a very clear comment made by members. Well, we ask for members' understanding that we want to include the financial information for all the financial years for members. That's why we submitted the papers late. Dr. Tan Yueheng. Thank you. In the panel meeting, I talked about this. The CHK has a very unique mission as the hospital helps support the healthcare system in Hong Kong. The operation model of the hospital should become more successful, so we should not give up on the hospital. I agree that the repayment period should be extended by 3 years. It is not a solution for the government to take over the hospital. The hospital should increase revenue and improve its management instead. However, the government should not keep injecting money into the hospital. At the end of the day, the hospital needs to improve its operation and management. The hospital should stringently implement the 6 business strategies. And all areas should be covered by the business strategies in terms of the hospital's operation. Some members just now mentioned about this too. That is about the financing. It looks like the hospital will have to look for a viable financing option. We are a financial center. We have the stock market. We also have the private equity market. So we are well positioned to support the operation of the hospital. If technology enterprises from other places can list in Hong Kong, well, how come the hospital isn't able to look for a financing option while it is suffering a loss? It has been making money. So it might be feasible for us to explore other options like bond issuance. If we are to look for a viable financing option, we'll have to think about how to do it. Dr. Norman Chan is an expert in this area, so we really need to think about it. And the CHK Hospital is an operating entity. It needs management. Are there any indicators for the management? I don't see any indicators here to assess the management's performance. While it is an operating entity, we have to look at the profit made by the hospital to assess the performance of the management. even if the government needs to take over the hospital at the end, the hospital will still have to provide services. So how will the university assess the performance of the management of the hospital? I think the management of the university needs to look into this. The 3-year extension is not the ultimate solution. What is important that the hospital is now given another opportunity to improve its operation. The first question is about financing. The second is about assessment of the hospital's management. Under Secretary. On financing, we thank Dr. Tan for the suggestions. Let's see if Dr. Norman Chen has anything to say. I thank Dr. Tan for the suggestions. If the extension approval is approved, we will look for a financing option. However, we have to first assess the seriousness of the cash flow shortfall. We are quite optimistic about the long-term operation of the hospital. However, from an investment or from an investor's perspective, they have to agree to that model. If we have any concrete proposals, we will talk to the administration. I think we should continue to explore debt investment. Yes, President of the University. Now on the Board of Directors, members are working towards this direction. The CEO will look at all the KPIs. Thank you. Next member to speak, Mr. Bill Tang. I was appointed as a member of the Board of Directors of the CHK Hospital. However, I'll still vote because there are no pecuniary interests in relation to this item. I worked as a volunteer. I recognize the positive values created by the university as well as the CHK hospital. However, I am concerned about the financial viability of the hospital. I am confident about the future of the hospital. We have to make use of the network as well as the assets of the university. We have 260,000 alumni as well as their family members. We have 8,000 to 9,000 staff working at the university, and a lot of them are earning great money. Also, we have great R&D capacity as well as teaching capacity. Currently, the target is 51% in terms of the package charging services that have to be provided by the hospital. I think we need to set a higher KPI so that the public would recognize the value of the hospital. We have to make the public aware of the importance of the hospital, and if we can achieve that, there will be businesses for the hospital. We have to enhance the confidence of members of this council in the hospital. The administration admitted that the CHK hospital has not been performing well in the past. Are there any concrete strategies that the hospital will put in place which might help boost the confidence of the members of this council so that we can vote in favor of this proposal? I'll ask the CHK hospital to reply to the questions. On containing costs, since day one, we've been very concerned about our expenditure. We try to contain costs in different ways. On manpower, for example, our staff to hospital bed ratio compared to other private hospitals or even public hospitals, the ratio is quite low for our hospital. It's about 4 staff to 1 hospital bed. On the administrative side, we needed the basic manpower to establish the system, and afterwards we haven't seen any growth in terms of the number of staff. Our information technology system is quite advanced. However, we only have about 20 staff on our IT team. So manpower is one way, and also we have to apportion the cost. We occupy a site of 100,000 square meters. We hope that we have enough patience to help contain the growth of cost. We also have energy saving measures to save up the money that we have to pay for the electricity bill. So we have been putting in place different measures to contain the cost. We see that the economy scale as well as the number of patients continue to improve, and the cost has been reducing. Yes, Mr. Biltang, I want to spend the last 30 seconds I have to say this. By extending the repayment period, the hospital will have to provide public services, which will be calculated in terms of the inpatient bed days, and they'll have to shoulder an interest rate of 5.7%. Mr. Edmund Wong, I want to ask about paragraph 6 of the paper. It says that the CHK hospital has 353 hospital beds compared to March 2024. There was an increase of 19% from 297 beds. The fixed cost has been on the rise because of the increase in the number of beds, so the incremental revenue will increase. The profit is not growing as expected. This might be because of the utilization rate of the services. How can we improve this situation? Secondly, from an accounting perspective, there is a fixed cost, of course. However, we also have to take into account the quantity. When will step cost rise? Say an increase of 19% will lead to a growth in fixed cost. So how many beds does the hospital have to run in order to contain the fixed cost and optimize the profit? Dr. Feng, in November, we managed to break even in terms of our EBITDA. Of course, this 1 month break even does not mean anything. However, in terms of our cash balance, we have achieved a break even. Say next year, if we open more beds, we will have to hire more people to work for us. However, we are at a pretty good juncture where we will have a cash surplus. However, with the current cash balance, we may not be able to repay the loan in 3 years' time. Well, the hospital said it has achieved a break-even. With more hospital beds, it might be able to gain more revenue. With the existing circumstances, how many more beds do you have to create in order to optimize your profit and operation? We have about 300 hospital beds now, If you look at our operation, as well as the revenue and expenditure, we are close to a break-even point. So we have already achieved that. If we continue to increase the number of beds, we will be able to earn more revenue. Well, there should be a ceiling to the fixed cost. That is, when we reach a certain point, if we continue to create more hospital beds, there might be a growth in the fixed cost. Well, let me turn to paragraph 30. It says that doctors from the CHK hospital are sent to the New Territory East, the New Territories West, the Kowloon West clusters, and so on. And these doctors cover specialties in surgery and urology and so on. Do you have figures or numbers that show us how many cases you have helped to handle from public hospitals?
We do have the figures. Every year we agree with the government in relation to the number of new cases and the number of day procedures to be provided by us. We do incur a cost, and it will we need to spend money on that, and it becomes part of the cost on our part. Do you have the number of cases that you have taken up every year, and what is the cost? Because indirectly you are sort of subsidizing the government. We do have the figures, and we can come up with the calculation in relation to the cost. Yes, please provide the information after the meeting. I have a question on enclosed chart 1. For enclosed chart 1, it is about inpatient revenue. It is $174 million unfavorable. Now, if we have fewer inpatients, then the doctor costs and the staff costs will also be reduced. But at the same time, we will be having 13% less revenue. And then perhaps you can control the cost in relation to this so that the loss won't be that huge. A brief answer, please. It isn't as simple as that. You can't just look at the level of service. It depends on the nature of the service. In some cases, the marginal profit is higher, while others, in other cases, if we have to rely heavily on doctors, then the doctor cost will account for a greater share. So it depends on the distribution among the different specialties. Thank you. Next, Mr. Chen Kim-po. Thank you, Chair. For private hospitals in Hong Kong, 70–80% of the cost is met by the insurance companies. Now, for many years, we have claims from unnecessary procedures and medical frauds and etc. The amount of money involved is increasing. The premium has to be increased. For those who are retirees and age 60 or above, they find it hard to afford. CHK-CM is new, and there are many packaged charging services. It's easier for patients to budget for their needs. So if CHK is running well, then you will have a pressure on other hospitals. So CHK-CM has a role to play. It can suppress the inflation of the medical costs. Now, the center has been cooperating with 3 major insurance companies. In the year 2024, they have got 30% more of revenue when it comes to this area. There should be more publicity so that agents will know more about you, and then you can attract more business, and that will also increase your revenue. Now, in fact, the model of CHK-CM will help us to address the problem of escalation of medical costs is higher than the inflation rate. You can help to address that problem. Many members have already asked many questions. Basically, I agree with the further extension of 3 years in relation to the first repayment date. Thank you. Next, Mr. Yim Kong. it's better if we have an additional high quality private hospital. So I really hope that CHKCM can continue to improve its service. Many members talked about the diversity of financing options. I support what members have said. The hospital shouldn't just count on the government. I think the hospital should turn to the market and try to seek help there. Currently, the CHKCM is an entity. I think you can turn to the market to get capital. Now, CHK itself has got more than $35.5 billion in its reserves. If the university is willing to become the guarantor, I'm sure the hospital can get financing options from the market. You can also go to the mainland. In fact, the rate is lower than that elsewhere. So for CHK, you can try to get a lower interest rate when it comes to choosing which financing option to deploy. I think it is good. In this way, the government can get back $2 billion and they can go some way to address the government's fiscal deficit. So if the university is willing to become the guarantor, would you consider having cross-boundary financing options by turning to the GBA market? And then the quality of the hospital is well known. Many mainlanders come to Hong Kong to get hospital insurance coverage. For GBA residents, they are happy to come to stay in private hospitals in Hong Kong. So you do have a bright future. So you have to step up your publicity and promotional work in the GBA so that you can facilitate the GBA residents to come to Sha Tin to see a doctor or to stay in the hospital. For Hong Kong residents, we go to the mainland to spend money, and whenever we cross the boundary, we can take a ride in the vehicles provided by the shops. Maybe we can do the same. For high-spending patients, maybe you can provide transport to take them to Sha Tin so that they can come here to see the doctor or to get admitted to the hospital. Dr. Chen can address the first question and then Dr. Fung the second question. Dr. Norman Chen. Thank you, Chair. We have an open mind in relation to the consideration of different financing options. Issuing bonds or getting loans across the boundary. Indeed, they have got a lower interest rate, but then for their current capital account, they do have some restrictions. After we have issued the bonds, we hope that we can make immediate use of the loans, like repaying the government. But then if there are restrictions on the flow of the capital, we need to think twice. What about stepping up the publicity in the GBA? Well, in fact, we addressed this issue previously. We'll continue with our promotional work. I agree with what Mr. Yim has said. Yes, if you step up your publicity in GBA, and I'm sure you can resolve the problem of cross-boundary funding from the GBA. Ms. Priscilla Leung, we are concerned about this. In the year 2015, the LegCo gave approval and gave full support to the idea of having this hospital. This is because we want to have a hospital for the middle class. We subscribe to the philosophy. My family members, in particular, my mother, used to go to the CHKCM, and we are happy with their high level of service quality. When we discuss whether we should grant the request to extend the repayment date, I was at the panel meeting. We were concerned about the management of the hospital. Now, on the one hand, you have already revamped your management. Now, the president will sit on the board of directors, so the president will be even busier. Now, in the past, we used to say that we were worried as to whether the executives are aware of what they are doing. We are glad. It is good to see that you are determined to have a reform. Now, for CHK, I think CHK is trying to make the management more credible. I have a vote of confidence in you. I really hope that in terms of management, in terms of the public expectation, please do a better job. Probably you have done a good job in the past, but then you are not able to tell the public. So many people find the case unacceptable. I, of course, agree that you should be given 3 more years. The first priority is that we shouldn't allow the hospital to be closed down. We have been fighting for a children's hospital. Now they are suffering from a manpower shortage. So you have got the FOM right next door. Now, for the children's hospital, they lack doctors in the field of ENH. I think you can provide backup to our government hospitals. It is for the public good. Now, what I want you to do next time you come is not just to tell us whether you can repay the loan. You need to come up with a 10-year plan. We must give the hospital sufficient time. Medical services is something for the long term. In the past, I used to say that if the government has got a revenue of $10 billion, it can all go into medical and health. I think we must give them the chance to start all again. In particular, we have just left the epidemic behind us. So you haven't got sufficient time, I'm afraid. So after getting the approval this time, I think with a new team in place, you should develop a 10-year plan. You should try to get elites from the business world to help you. And by helping you, it means that the society of Hong Kong is given a boost in terms of having a quality hospital that is sustainable. That's all from me. If they're happy to provide supplementary answers, they can use my time. Anything from the Undersecretary? No. Thank you for her support. Professor Chai, anything to add? No. Next, Mr. Chu Kwok Keung. If you borrow a sum of money, you need to repay. Even though it is to be extended by 3 years, one day you still have to repay the loan. So we aren't just interested in whether they can repay today, but also whether they can repay in 3 years' time. The CHKCM is a private hospital. The figures are not nice and they have less revenue and they're making heavier losses, $700 million in a few years' time, and then the cash balance will be a mere $2 million in a few years' time. If there is loss, then it means that you lose everything. At the panel meeting, it is said that we should advance the discussion of financing options. The Bureau thinks that the hospital can break even. But still, we have to look at the fiscal deficit that the government itself is facing. The government itself has to be very vigorous in controlling the cost. So the hospital must have full justification before we can be convinced to grant approval to the extension. Even though you can get away with it today, please don't assume and take it for granted that in 3 years' time you can still get another extension. If you can't go into the, if you are still in the red, I don't think you can expect another approval from the LegCo. Probably by then we would rather have it taken over by the government. And it is a separate story whether it should be retendered or whether it should be converted into a public hospital. I think we should all consider such matters and get ready for that.
主席，
Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any questions about the reason for the hospital to be established. However, even with good objectives, we have to look at the implementation of the operation model of the hospital. Public funds are involved, so the hospital has to be accountable. Looking at 2015 paper, back then, we were quite confident with the government's monitoring of the hospital's operation, and we're also confident with the operation model of the hospital. The management was saying that back then they were too optimistic and the operating environment has changed. It sounds like you are simply defeating what you believed in before. If that's the case, should we still approve the extension proposal? I have a question first on the government's role. Can the hospital repay the debt from 2015? Well, I've been sitting here for a few hours now, and I don't think the hospital is not going to be responsible for that. I think the hospital has undeniable responsibility. I looked at papers from year 2015, and according to the paper, the university had the role to monitor the situation of the hospital. In 2023, the government also mentioned that the hospital would have his financial projection and status monitored. If we approve this extension proposal, how will the government enhance its monitoring role? If not, then I would be quite worried about whether your plan would succeed. According to 2023 projection as well as the actual figures of 2025, well, I am worried that the projections made in 2023 were just a guesstimate. In 2023, the university said by 2025 the hospital would break even and that it would be feasible for the hospital to repay the loan in 5 years' time, and that the projection was a responsible one. Now, with the updated figures, does the government think the hospital's operating model is feasible? You cannot simply say the hospital said it was feasible. The government itself also has the role to monitor the hospital situation. Undersecretary, on the monitoring front, the government has already appointed a member to sit on the board of directors of the hospital. This is direct monitoring. Also, the CHK hospital will have to report annually to us its financial position. According to the loan agreement, the hospital would have to provide supplementary financial reports, and also it would have to provide reports on its cash flow. So we will monitor all these. In addition, we ask the university to help monitor the CHK hospital so that it could help ensure the governance of the hospital. We have been communicating frequently with the hospital as well as the university. We hope that the management of the hospital can help contain cost. So far with the statistics, we think that the future of the hospital is quite optimistic. This is because we do see the hospital's determination to improve the situation. I also know that they are exploring some financing options to deal with the financial problems. I also see that the university has the determination to revamp the management of the hospital. For example, the president of the university is now sitting on the board of directors of the hospital. So we are confident that things will improve. Also, we've been communicating regularly with the CHK hospital so that it can achieve its targets in terms of its financial position. Also, every year we submit a report to the Legislative Council in terms of the hospital's performance. Mr. Brave Chen. We can tell from the figures that the CHK hospital is met with a lot of difficulties. The president of the university is going to be involved, and this helps boost our confidence. The undersecretary said the university helps take care of the hospital. We have some $80 billion of deficit now. I believe Dr. Norman Chen can help the hospital find ways to increase its revenue. Now, on the reserve of the university, it has about $35.5 billion of reserves. With the involvement of the president of the university, will the president become a guarantor so that you can further enhance our confidence in terms of the cash flow of the hospital? With all these supports, I think members of this council will be more willing to support this extension proposal. This is because we all have worries about the economic outlook of the city. I believe if the president of the university can be the guarantor, then it might help settle the situation. Professor John Chai, do you have anything to add? We thank the member for the suggestion. We have a healthy fiscal reserve to ensure a comprehensive development of the university. We have different priorities in terms of how we use our funds. As mentioned by the administration, if we get the approval of this extension proposal, we will start looking at different financing options, including making use of our own reserve. I agree that you need to have a healthy reserve. However, you need to save the hospital. You should at least inject some money into the hospital from your reserve, and this will make it easier for you to save the hospital. So this is a comment from Mr. Brave Chen. Mr. Tommy Zhou, I don't need a reply from the administration or the university. Back in 2015, I voted in favor of the loan proposal. Back then, Mr. Chang Hoi-jun asked me to sit on the board of directors of the hospital. I refused. This is because I had to chair the finance committee. It might be a wrong decision. Mr. Michael Tin and Mr. Chen Xiu-hong mentioned that the figures aren't looking good. I also have an MBA qualification. While I didn't get the degree from Harvard University, but still I cannot agree to the figures. 2 years ago, we had the same secretary and undersecretary who asked for the approval of the committee to extend the repayment period. Many members objected to the proposal. At that time, I thought the hospital wouldn't be able to repay the loan even with the 5-year extension. It is just that with a different chairman chairing the board of directors, things might be different. So I objected to the 5-year extension plan. And we ended up agreeing to a 2+3 proposal. I forgot to mention just now that since 2028, I've been a council member of the university. If we do not support this proposal, there might be a loan in default. The electrical members sitting on the council have been in talks with the government. The interest rate imposed by the government is a floating interest rate. It could go very high, it could also be very low. How can we make good use of the hospital beds? I hope that the medicine school of CHK as well as the university will look into this. I think the university is capable of getting donations. We should not only focus on the financing options. There are many people willing to donate. We have about 30 members in the council of the university. And we all want the hospital to succeed. It is like our son, so we will not give up on it. I ask all members of this council to vote in favor of this proposal. I ask that you trust members of the council of the university. We have the president of the university sitting on the board of directors of the hospital, even with such a huge workload. So I hope that you can all see the University Council's determination. I hope you trust that it will help with the management as well as with controlling the cost of the hospital. Dr. Chow Meng Kong, thank you, Chairman. I'm an alumni of the university. I am proud of the hospital as well as the university. With the new president, I believe there is a brighter future to the university. However, the hospital has been owing the government money. It has not been able to repay the loan, and this is quite worrying. The Finance Committee helps look at the financial situation of the government. So my question is, we extended the repayment period for 2 years already, and now you're asking for another 3 years. As mentioned by the university, it has already injected $3 billion, and the government has also put in $4 billion. So this might set an example for the third medical school in Hong Kong. Say 3 years later, if the hospital cannot repay the loan, will the university help settle the debt? Also, will you ask an organization to help repay the loan? I think this is a question for Dr. Norman Chen. We have talked a number of times about our position about the reserves. We will try to look for the best financing option. However, we cannot guarantee that we'll be able to find funds. We need to actually talk to the relevant parties to see how feasible our financing options are. However, please rest assured that we will communicate with the administration on any financing options or proposals we can think of. And any of these financing options will have to be approved by the Legislative Council. This is from the previous term of the university's management, and you are now handling the mess. However, you have no excuse because you are in this position and you'll have to think of a solution. We're supposed to put this item to vote after Mr. Peter Hsu has spoken. However, after I drew the line, 2 members expressed their wish to speak. One is Mr. Jeffrey Lam, the other one is Mr. Gary Chan. I'll give each of you 2 minutes. Yes, Mr. Peter Hsu.
Thank you, Chair. Well, many private hospitals have partnership with specialist doctors, so the doctors will admit patients to a private hospital when an operation is needed. For CHK, I think you mainly rely on in-house doctors. For visiting doctors, how many are there and what is the percentage? Yes, please, Undersecretary. Maybe Dr. Fung can answer the question. Well, for the time being, for doctors who are qualified to admit patients, there are about 1,200 of them, and about 500 of them actually bring in patients. What is the percentage then? Well, in terms of our patient numbers, we mainly count on our in-house doctors. There aren't too many of them, 60 of them. For an A&E department and for the radiology and health check programs, our doctors are mainly responsible for such services. We have got 3 major categories. First, professors. Professors are coming more and more often, and they're taking up a higher and higher ratio. Another group is in-house staff, doctors, and thirdly, we've got visiting doctors. Visiting doctors account for quite a large share as well. Chair, today, many members are concerned about financing options, whether they've got sufficient money to repay the loan, and whether the university should be committed. Now, for CHK itself, I know the government has been providing a lot of money to support the university and the hospital. We aren't talking about a public hospital. After all, it is a private hospital. So you have to save yourself. You have to rescue yourselves. If not, how can you save the lives of the patients? For your business model, I think it is the main point in this issue. Earlier on at the panel meeting, I talked to the Director of Bureau, that is Professor Low. Now, in the private market, hospitals don't lose money, and they don't have a huge cost, and they don't have to pay for the doctors' salaries. Now, Dr. Fung told us that 40% of your cost goes to doctors' salaries. But then for other private hospitals, they have got doctors who would refer patients to a hospital that has a long-term cooperation relationship with the doctor. So the hospital will provide inpatient service, the hospital will provide a operating theater. So the hospital doesn't have to incur a lot of costs. At most, maybe providing nursing services. But in your case, you have got your own staff doctors and you don't actually have a lot of cooperation with visiting doctors. You talk about having to ensure the quality of your service. Of course, visiting doctors may vary in terms of the quality. I think you have to identify good doctors. Now, if you have got good ways to find business, then of course you don't need to worry about that. You have only commissioned less than 60% of your hospital beds, and then only 10 out of 25 of your operating theaters are put into use. Now, 2 years have passed, and it seems that you haven't got sufficient business, so you need to rethink. Now, some members are saying that you can open your service to non-local patients. If you haven't got sufficient business, then of course you should consider that. But come a day when you have sufficient business from within the community, then you should focus on the local populations. So you have to look at your original mission and your vision. So you need to find a way to modify your business model so that more beds are put to use, more operating theaters are put to use, so that you don't need to worry about financing options. The main point is to have business and to make money. I think, like other members, he just expects time to be given to him to air his views rather than getting an answer. Jeffrey Lam, 2 minutes. CHK and CHKCM have achieved a lot, including the Faculty of Medicine. And in fact, the university has nurtured many well-known doctors. And for Professor Low himself, I think we are all aware of his medical achievements. I'm sure he will soon be the second Nobel Prize winner from CHK. I would like to congratulate him in advance. Mr. Lam, why don't you focus on this FC paper? Yes. In relation to this paper, it is about the dollar sign. Under the leadership of Professor Low, both the university and the hospital can overcome the question before us, the problem before us. I take this opportunity to appeal to the alumni of CHK as well as the general population. Do support the CHK, do support the CHK Medical Center. Professor Low is a virtuous person, and he's more than a doctor. He's leading the hospital. We should go all out and wholeheartedly support the paper. The last to speak, Mr. Gary Chen, Chairman. If I may ask a question concerning enclosures 3 and 4. There are certain figures covering the years 23 to 29. Instead of losing $4 billion, there will be a surplus of $37 million. Please elaborate on that. Dr. Fong, well, our operation is expanding. We don't have a small number of patients. If you come to visit us, you will know that we have got many patients. And then we have been in operation for 3 years, and we are able to achieve a break-even in the EBITDA. I think this is rarely seen. Yes, Yes, I've only got 2 minutes. Please don't erode the time slot assigned to me. I just want to help you. In the year 2023-24, instead of $300 million, you will have $50 million in 24-25, and then 26-27 you will start to make money, and in 27-28 $200 million. The figures are really surprising. So what have you done to project such a huge increase in your revenue? I just want to know more about the figures and the justification behind your projection. I'm an alumni. I do have expectations about the hospital. I do hope that you will succeed. And I hope that the CHKCM or MC can be a different hospital from other hospitals. That is, you won't just be going after profits. So please make sure that you can instill sufficient confidence in us. That is, you become a hospital that have prices that we can afford, and that you can share the burden of the public hospitals, so that we can be assured that we are doing the right thing in giving you the approval. So we're going to put the matter to the vote. So Dr. Fung, the last time to give a reply. Well, hospital beds and operating theaters, patients will all increase in terms of the volume. We are running 300 hospital beds. In a few years' time, the figure will go up to 516, and then all the capacity will be fully utilized. A member has already asked for a division, so the bell will ring for 5 minutes.
係黃錦輝議員。
Yes, Professor Wong. Yes, I think you would like to make a declaration. Please switch on his microphone. Professor Wong's microphone. William Wong. Yes, I know. Maybe technicians are trying to identify or to find out where your seat is. Yes, please try to speak, and then it's easier for them to identify your seat. Yes, I need to declare I'm a staff member of the CHK. Miss Priscilla Leung, alumni, no need to declare. There are so many of us here. Mr. Edward Lau. Please wait for the mic to turn on. The mic. I have to declare that I'm on the council of CUHK. Mr. Tang Fei, I'm a part-time staff member. I still need to make a declaration. Yes, Dr. Lam Chi-yun. I'm on the board of directors of the of CHK New Asia. No need for you to declare your alumni status. Many of you who spoke already indicated your status. No need to make a declaration separately. That would take up too much time.
佢知道，唔會。好，咁啊，提一提大。
Just want to remind members that after we've put the matter to the vote and after the division, we still have to deal with item 3. Do stay behind for the third item.
好，現在開始表決。
Members, please proceed to vote. Now let's see the results of the voting. 63 in favor, no one against, and 9 abstentions. I declare that this proposal is approved. Now let's deal with the last agenda item today, FCR Record 0242552. This item seeks approval of the recommendation of the PWSC made at this meeting held on the 7th of February 2025 concerning PWSC 2024-25-20. It is a proposal to upgrade part of 895TH to Category A as 900TH Northern Metropolis Highway Investigation at an estimated cost of $688.3 million in money of the day prices. Since the PWSC did not recommend further discussion by the Finance Committee, I will now put this item, FCR 2024-2552, to vote. Would members in favor of the proposal set out in the paper please raise their hands? Anyone against the proposal? No one. I believe the majority of the members present are in favor of this proposal. This proposal is approved. The next FC meeting will be held on the 21st of March 2025. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.